Action. Good morning, nice to meet you. This is my art studio and I'm working on some interactive anti-bully art that I believe we need now more than ever. With the recent tragedy here in South Florida with the shooting, these mental health issues are difficult to speak about, they're feelings. I've gone through a rough time myself and that's why I've made this anti-bully art. But we need to talk about it now more than ever, and I believe I've come up with a way to address it and do something about it with my interactive anti-bully art. My theme to life and my approach to art and work and life is whimsical. So this is rather whimsical art. I have ADHD dyslexia, and that's part of my art approach. However, as a result of what I felt was a dastardly deed of leveraging my disability, and I can't speak too much of it, but it was my feeling that I was bullied unjustly, and in trying to move through these feelings and do some good for myself and others, I've come up with an interactive art project that addresses bullies, cocksuckers, and slanderers in a rather whimsical way, as I believe humor often bridges a gap and produces the shortest distance between 2 points. And this is the project of which I speak. I'm reaching out to many of the best and brightest in the country, in the world, many of whom I've known over the years. Partied with as a teenager, J.J. Abrams, filmmaker, former director of NASA, Lori Garver, Colorado College friends, and others whom I've met in my 20s and 30s. Oprah, who worked out at the same health club, Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, and other dyslexics like King Carl Gustaf of Sweden, who's dyslexic. Excuse me, oh, did I drop something? Like a name? Anyway, so that's part of the program, and not to bore you with it, you can see the book. And the theme of this whole endeavor is, you can see on the book here, these examples of my artwork, a close-up of this epileptic, and I'm dyslexic, so I feel I can take a little liberty here and say, "Stand up, America. It's time to spill more beans than an epileptic making a burrito. To end bullies to end pricks who bully like pussies." So it's a little scatological in that regard. I hope we're comfortable speaking of this, and we should be. If we go to the next page, we see what NBC has done recently, and they've taken a very serious approach to end this sort of harassment of which I feel I've been experiencing. I experienced it twice in my life. Once when I was younger, I was suicidal over it, and I said, you know what, another rodeo, for Christ's sakes, I got to do something about this one. So I have. So here's CEO of David of NBC, his approach, and he has to do something, is what I see is, and I make an analogy, I'm a pilot, I like flying, is he's kicked rudder and jammed the stick so far forward as he's in a spin, and he had to do something, so he came up with some pretty crazy regulations, Mr. Andy Lack, but he had to do something where you have to hug and then jump back 5 feet, and I say that perhaps my interactive art that addresses and exposes bullies can provide a perspective to conduct ourselves in a fashion that is less neurologically challenged than that kind of silliness. And my silliness is of course of a different nature. For example, my intent to expose one of the most dastardly forms of bullying that I have found is, and is typical in the cyberbullying, is these emotional bullies who play with your mind, and you know, that's always a stepping stone into more grave acts. They could do whatever the hell they can get away with. So I've come across this one, and this is what I call the Jedi mind trick, and this is something we simply can't have in this country. It's wrong, it's ugly, it's mean, and you know, I'll explain it briefly in this artwork. The Jedi mind trick, and here you can see some examples while I read from it. The Jedi mind trick, passive aggressive, a fake friend who plays nice to trick you with a sneak attack, a Trojan horse, a Pearl Harbor, a quick serve. That's a detriment to your mental health, resulting in resentment and hostility from being played. And we have to speak of these feelings that stick with one. You know, this son of a bitch who killed all these people, he was a murderer, but he had deep mental health issues. And I can relate, quite frankly, to one of his, which is quite a stirring and moving one. I'll get back to this in a minute while I'm on that topic because it's important. He was adopted, and his parents died. He felt as if he had the rug rubbed out from under him. I can identify with his feelings because I'm adopted, and I've recently experienced some of that kind of trauma, and it sticks with you. It plays with your mind, and it is a condition that can stir up some deep-seated, horrible feelings of anger and upset, and these things need to be addressed. There's, cases of this. A friend of mine who was not even adopted, he was stuck in the birth canal at birth. Consequently, he has a tremor. We remember these things when we're born, and it's even in our DNA. There was a study in Sweden where they keep strict records that showed the offspring of those who suffered from the famine had weight issues. So somehow these offspring who were genetically related to the famine sufferers, in their DNA they were obese because their grandparents endured a famine. So this stuff sticks with you. We have to address it and deal with it, or else we're going to have more crap. And I went through some bad feelings, and now I'm trying to speak of how we address these feelings. So this is a nasty, dastardly deed, a Jedi mind trick, to play with somebody's mind and trick them like that. And we see this in cyberbullying. So it's the feeling of being played as dastardly. And how does that work? One would say, well, you have to say, well, it's a trick. It's a passive aggressive trick where they suck you in. And they say, oh, I'm your friend. How does that feel? Oh, that's nice. And then you're complacent, and then whack, an attack to the back of the head. And I say this kind of mental feeling of being played like that, and of enduring some of these emotional, distressful, demeaning acts hurt as much as a shot to the nutsack. And it's rather graphic, but true. They say the sneaky attack hurts your brain. It's difficult to read. Now, this is the point of this artwork, is that it plays with you and it's difficult to read. And I'm going to read it from the back of this because I can't focus on that. The passive-aggressive fake friend conceals sinister intents by tricking you into complacently trust emotional connection that feels good as if a head massager, but only a head game, a sneak attack on your brain. To cover up intentional antagonism of a fake friend. Beware of the Jedi mind trick. So that's something that happens, and we need to be aware of, because before these predators do more dastardly deeds, they start small and they escalate, and that's how hate groups operate. That's how systemic bullies operate, and those who systemically abuse power will get away with whatever they can. So Mr. Andy Lack has addressed that here, and I speak of I should have read this first. Situation that took, they were looking for accountability. I let you read the book. So, the idea here is the next step in addressing this issue, of course, is the overreaction. Here is a case where a kid, like a 9-year-old, was accused of harassment, and he wasn't even sexual at the age, and the accusers, when they were pushed to qualify their accusations, caved, and consequently it was a clear case of slander, and we can't have that either. And this can be an overreaction to the situation, and for that reason, I think my art is a good application. And I'll show you this reaction here. We can focus in on this. Buy what's right. Stop Gestapofication of the nation. Don't let the shadow touch them. And this is a World War II propaganda poster that was to buy war bonds, and I use it for promoting the idea that we don't want a situation here of a Gestapofication of the nation. And the problem permeates the very pinnacle and principles by proliferating pathetic power of perverse procedure, where it plunders the rights of the accused, postulating poppycock with pride and paucity, penalizing and purging without proper prudence. So of course we need to vet these things, and I think that's a good take. Thank you. I'll show you how. Good. How long was that?